record. Perfect. Hide controls. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a few questions before we get started, just so our viewers can understand what we're doing today. Hello, everybody who's watching. My name is Unique Shea. I am the owner of the Holistic Goddess Academy, epigenetics counselor, endometriosis and Crohn's warrior, stay-at-home mom to two beautiful littles. And today we are going to go over Cassandra Birch's DNA report and kind of share what we found through her DNA report and how we've been able to support her. So Cass, if you can share a little bit about your history and why you got your DNA tested and what we're hoping to find today.
Yeah, I'm a longtime endo warrior, stage 4. I battled that. I had bloating, extreme fatigue, heavy periods, just gut issues, you name it, I've experienced it. Infertility, just lots of little things that have led me to this point. I, in the fall of 2023, was post-hysterectomy due to all of my endo issues, due to the laparoscopic surgeries, due to IVF, and thankfully giving birth. But all that took such a huge toll on my body that it left me with no option in that moment. So post-hysterectomy, I was put on hormone therapy and still feeling like crap. I was just on this roller coaster of constantly tired still. Now I had hot flashes. Now I had less energy. Now I was just like kind of navigating, just going with the flow. So then the fall of 2023, I landed on DNA and whole food supplementing that changed my life.
And it's been such a beautiful journey to watch. So Cassandra came to me, I think, November last year. We're August 2024 right now. She came to me November last year, and it has just been the most beautiful transformation to watch, to see her get off of synthetic hormones, find her energy, and just feel like she's in her 20s all over again. So we're going to go through her DNA report today and kind of pull out the different areas where we see variances that contributed to the development and cause of this disease in her body, and kind of explain what we get to find out through DNA. And I'll get her to share some of the different lifestyle changes that she's made along the way that have supported her weak genes in this transformation. So if you're looking at the screen, this is her summary report. We're going to go through her summary report today. Anything we see a variance of 40% or greater, so the slider bar, anything that's red at 40% or greater, we're going to look at today and talk about why that might be contributing to, metabolic dysfunction, hormone imbalance, and kind of just malaise in the body, right? I have a very similar story to her. I've also overcome my endometriosis and Crohn's using this very same report. And I'm just so passionate about what we can offer with DNA Power. So Cass, can you share with me a little bit how your nutrition was when we first started working together and what it looks like now? And then I'll dive into how some of your genetic variations caused and create support for that way of eating.
Yes, my diet was carb heavy, lacking protein, cheese on everything, definitely everything that I should not have been doing. Even though like I was adding vegetables in the pasta, I was, putting chicken in there sometimes, but I just wasn't doing it the correct way. It's like even the noodles, the carbs are what was just, it was just too much for my body. After especially seeing my DNA, I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
So Cass's report, I remember all that too, now that you say it. So in the protein need, this is usually the first gene I come to, I'd say with 90, if not 100% of my clients, because one of the biggest gene variances I see commonly in diet management is a protein need variance. The bigger the variance here, the more protein you need. So with a small variance, I'd say 1 gram of protein per pound of lean mass. And as that variance increases, we can go all the way up to 1.5 grams per pound of lean mass. In Cassandra's case, with a 67% variance, I'd put her at 1.3 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of lean mass she's trying to maintain. So when we started working together and she's like, well, I eat carbs and cheese on everything, I was like, well, your carbs are no good. So if we look up here at the carbohydrate and insulin, she's got a small variance in both of these, but the protein, if she's not getting enough protein and defaulting to carbohydrates to fill that caloric value, right? We have a certain calorie count we want to target or hit in a day. And when we don't fill that with protein, we turn to carbohydrates. And like Cassandra was saying, you know, carbs and bread and pastas and flours and these really nutrient void carbohydrates that really cause quite a bit of inflammation in the body. We'll get to that a little bit later. But when we don't have enough protein and we overconsume carbohydrates, these small variances become big problems, right? She doesn't tolerate simple carbohydrates well. You know, if she eats too many, can contribute to weight gain, and then has a small variance in her ability to regulate insulin. And when we look at protein deficiency, we see insulin resistance, right? Prediabetes, blood sugar mismanagement. So overeating carbohydrates creates insulin resistance, and insulin resistance creates estrogen dominance. So when we're looking at endometriosis, hormone imbalance, make no wonder she ended up with endometriosis. Also,
yep,
dietary saturated fat. What's that?
I said in that endo belly.
That endo belly, yeah, that endo belly is no joke. If you've got a little tire you're trying to get rid of, that last 10, 15 pounds, your blood sugars are probably out of balance. So saturated fat is another big deal. I see saturated fat variances probably in 85 to 90% of my clients. And when we're looking at saturated fat, the quality of your meat matters huge. So if we're looking at a conventional grown animal versus a pasture raised grass-fed animal, the nutritional profile is significantly different. So you always want to source a pasture raised, grass-fed, very humanely healthy raised animal. They have 3,000 milligrams less saturated fat per 100-gram serving. One 100-gram serving of meat gives you 25 grams of protein. So if we're looking to hit our protein target, 100 to 150 grams of protein is giving you anywhere from 3,000 to 4,500 milligrams of saturated fat if you're not getting it from a pasture raised animal. And that can impact you significantly. So when we have variances in our saturated fat, we don't digest our fats well, we don't metabolize it well, and we end up packing away extra weight. And extra fluff on the body, you know, when we have extra fat, actually releases extra hormones. So then we also end up in that estrogen dominant state. So the quality of your meat super matters. You know, everybody's on this carnivore craze. Not everybody's suited for it. You need to be very, very careful that you're sourcing high quality grass-fed meats, limiting saturated fat. And again, seed oils as well are a saturated fat, and those are in absolutely everything. So being mindful of your types of proteins and salad dressings and all that stuff, making sure there's no soybean oil, canola oil, rapeseed oil, safflower, all that kind of stuff. Really sticking to your olive oil, avocado oil, nuts and seeds, really heart healthy fats. This LDL cholesterol, also a variance here, but this also in conjunction with your saturated fat. So just really being mindful of saturated fats overall will also help regulate cholesterol. Making sure you're getting enough soluble fiber as well. So, you know, lots of people will be on a very lean protein, high veg diet, missing the soluble fibers. And when we don't have enough soluble fiber, we can see an increase in LDL cholesterol. So picking, you know, more your apples, your pears, your oatmeals, that kind of stuff, and balancing that. When we're looking to balance carbohydrates, we want 1/4 to 1/3 from soluble fiber and 2/3 to 3/4 from a non-soluble fiber. So a soluble, your oatmeal, non-soluble, spinach, broccoli, that kind of stuff. Cass, also you have this stored body fat variance, so how well you burn stored fat. So to keep your daily calories on the lower end of your spectrum, right? So if we put you at, I think we were at 2,400-ish a day as a mom. So I would have you maybe at 23 or 2250, just because of this, to help you regulate your fat burning. You'd be a good candidate for Activate too.
Right.
I'm excited to try it. So we'll move into food tolerances. So Cass was saying she puts cheese on everything. You guys, cheese on everything. She's got a lactose variance. Girl, I was doing the same. You know, when I got my test done, I absolutely hated the taste of meat. So I was putting cheese on everything. Ground beef, chicken, eggs. Like I just didn't like the taste of protein. So I was masking it with cheese. I've got 100% variance in my lactose, which means I do not digest dairy well at all. When we have genetic variances in our food tolerance, so gluten, lactose, you know, salt, if we're eating the wrong types of salt, can contribute to inflammation. Over time, if we can, you know, we're constantly eating these foods that are inflammatory to us, we're causing inflammation in our gut, in our gut lining. And over time, we have these little villi, like these little hairs in our guts that absorb our nutrition. And the more inflammation we introduce to our guts, these hairs kind of pull back and break down, and eventually you develop holes in the lining of your intestine, called leaky gut syndrome. So eating cheese on everything, I wouldn't be surprised if you had leaky gut syndrome, severe inflammation, maybe even pain in your joints, lots of mucus too in your body. So what have you done since finding this out, and has it made much change?
Oh yeah, I'm very mindful of even what types of cheese now. Like I go for like mozzarella. I actually go to like the cheese counter and I get fresh cheese rather than the bag shredded cheese that's on sale. And it has made a huge difference. I used to like get hit with these like cramping pains, and then you're like, oh no, I have to all of a sudden go to the bathroom, or you'd be out doing something and you'd have to kind of be on alert because my stomach, I used to have terrible gut issues, but now I don't have that anymore. And it's
I'm
like
so
still
glad.
sometimes I catch myself and it's like, wow, it's been like months since I felt that way. So it's amazing. Just that like little, and I have a lot smaller portion. Like if I add cheese to something, it's maybe like a tablespoon versus like half the bag.
I resonate with that. I love cheese, having a big variance in lactose myself. I opt for lactose-free variations. So you can pretty much get any dairy in a lactose-free form now, and often they have lactase in them, which is the digestive enzyme for lactose. And I've found there's been a huge improvement in the dairy delivery that we now have access to. So if you suspect any kind of gut disruption from dairy product, maybe if you don't know, might be worth getting your genetics tested, because even if you don't feel the symptoms of having a lactose variance or you know, an intolerance to dairy, it doesn't mean it's not contributing to leaky gut or inflammation in the body. So being very mindful of gluten and lactose. You didn't have a big gluten variant, so that was cool to see, especially being such a carbo like I am. I think we have the same
Yeah.
variants there. But in the gluten area, one of the things I like to bring attention to is not so much the gluten itself, but the quality of the grain. So if we look in today's world, the majority of our gluten crops are genetically modified and super heavily sprayed with glyphosate. And glyphosate in the gut, you guys, will act like a antibiotic. So you're actually stripping your gut flora, just contributing to that inflammation, leaky gut syndrome, the holes in the lining of the intestines, that kind of thing. So being super mindful of glutinous crops and picking your sprouted grain variety. When we get a sprouted grain, it removes the gluten, and then always from an organic source as well to avoid that glyphosate. Salt wasn't a huge variation, but everything has so much salt in it now that even a little variation can contribute to quite a bit of inflammation. So we want to make sure when we are consuming salt, it's from a natural whole food source. So pink Himalayan salt, ideally Redmond's Real, Celtic salt, sea salt, or even Baja Gold. They're very mineral dense, right? So if we look at and compare salt to sugar, and we look at maple syrup versus your white table sugar, well, we're looking at Himalayan pink salt versus your iodized table salt. The highly refined salts and sugars have been stripped of absolutely everything but the glucose and the sodium. So we're missing all of the essential minerals and other electrolytes that help balance that out. So being mindful of your sodium intake is going to be a big deal. Making sure you're getting adequate sodium, but from the right sources. Yes, I remember this sugar craving. So we share this one. So a carb junkie, and are you a sugar junkie?
Yes, I love my sugar, and I love baking. I used to just bake cakes and cupcakes and cookies, just whatever daily, because I find it very therapeutic. But now I bake very different after seeing my results. I now use syrup, the maple syrup instead of sugar. I now use dates, and I found so many alternatives. Like I can still bake just in a different way.
I would encourage you
So
to try also organic coconut sugar. It's
I've seen that.
significantly less sweet for the same, how would we say, fullness. Like, you know, when you use brown sugar versus white sugar, you have like a
Yeah.
full flavor. Coconut sugar is even more. It is so good,
Okay.
and it's even less um, glucose than your brown sugars and your maple syrups and stuff like that. So give that a shot. But if we look at Cassandra's report, sugar is not her best friend. We have a sugar craving gene variance at 50%, and then we have a sweet taste variance at 50%. So I look at these together because when we have a sugar craving variance, it means that we have a reduced ability to resist sweet foods. And then the sweet taste means that she doesn't taste sweet as effectively. So when we don't taste sweet as effectively, it takes more to satisfy the sweet taste. And then she's got that variance in her ability to resist it. So her and I share these variances where we're super susceptible to finishing off our kids' bag of Halloween candy in 2 days. And this is a problem because if we look above and we've got that protein gene variance, right, she's not getting enough protein, the insulin resistance will hit her like a ton of bricks overnight, which will cause a wave of hormone imbalance. And if she doesn't, keep track of that or be very cautious of that, it can bite her in the butt really quick. So making sure we're getting adequate protein for sure, because you just have a big risk of insulin resistance from over consuming carbohydrates and sweet foods. So being super mindful, the more protein we eat, the less we have sugar cravings as well. So making sure we're hitting that protein target is gonna help you balance your insulin and reduce those sugar cravings. And then the bitter taste, she's got 100% variance in her bitter taste. So for her and I, dark chocolate actually tastes sweet because we don't have that bitter offset. So again, being super mindful of, your sweet foods that might have a bitter offset. You don't taste the bitter. So it's just that much sweeter, that much, that much more satiable,
Yeah.
really hard to resist. So being very
Yeah,
mindful.
and I do notice that. And I do notice that now, like when I don't get enough protein, I'm in the cabinet, like looking around, but I am very mindful on, I don't buy all that junk food anymore that I know I'll eat. So I'm in the
I'm the same
cabinets looking
way.
for it. Yeah, I'm like in the cabinets looking for it, but then it's like, grab some chicken or grab some protein, and then it's like the craving goes away.
Yeah, I'm the same way where I'll be like, oh, I want something sweet. And I'll look around and there's
Mhm.
nothing. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll have a can of tuna and crackers or
Exactly.
something because it's
Yes.
just not there. Because I'm the same way. If it's there, I'm diving into it. And then if we
Yep.
look at blood glucose management, every time you eat sugar, you get a blood glucose spike. And as soon as you come crashing down again, you're looking for sugar again. So that becomes
Yep.
a really dangerous roller coaster of just snacking on chocolate or sweets or gummies or whatever all day long, right? And I used to be
Yeah.
guilty of that, and like, make no wonder I ended up with endo. I'm not surprised. All the sugar, the lack of protein, the wrong types of protein, so I wasn't digesting it well. And we'll get into that in a minute when we cross the
Yeah,
hormonal.
it's crazy.
It's pretty wild. Okay, so vitamins and minerals. There's some, vitamins and minerals that we test for. We don't test for all of them, but we do test for a lot. And this area is very important because I'd say 85, 90, 95% of my clients, probably 100% actually, let's be real. These vitamin Bs, absolutely essential for hormone function and liver function. And as we go through the report, I'll pull those out for you. But when we have variances in our ability to absorb it, it means we're not absorbing them from our food very well. We're not getting them into the cells. So we're just nutritionally deficient. because we're just not absorbing our nutrients well. So we want to make sure, you know, when we have variances in our vitamins and minerals, that we're supplementing for these areas, because our foods just do not have the same level of nutrition as they once did. So for Cassandra, vitamin B6, super important for the macro digestion in the small intestine. So for her leaky gut, I don't even question if that's a problem. I know it is. She's missing vitamin B6. She's not digesting her macros in her gut well. And when we don't digest our macros, we have undigested food particles. So when we have leaky gut, we have undigested food particles exiting our intestines, going into our bloodstream, and our liver and kidneys are responsible to filter that out. So we really want to make sure that she's getting her B6s to digest her foods, really making sure we're getting the proper foods, not introducing these inflammatory foods. And then undigested food also contributes to candida overgrowth. So with endo, and hormone imbalance, we often see candida overgrowth in conjunction with leaky gut. So B6, super important. Also at risk of kidney stones from oxalate toxicity. So be mindful of your nightshades and your high oxalate foods if you're not supplementing with enough B6. Vitamin B9.
I've even noticed.
Go ahead.
Oh, I even noticed with like the bees, even eating healthier, even eating like more protein. If I don't keep my bees up, I cannot process the increase in protein that I'm now putting in my body. And that has actually caused like high histamine levels. That's what I'm noticing that I've been dealing with a lot, and I had no idea I was.
I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, I can't eat that much protein. It's actually not because you can't eat it, it's because you're nutritionally deficient in the nutrients that help you break it down and absorb it. So yeah, 100%. B vitamins are super important for the methylation function in breaking down homocysteine, which is the amino acid from eating meat proteins, and converting it to methionine for excretion. So yeah, totally. You need B vitamins for that. So I'm not surprised that's something you've noticed. And then your B vitamins are super important for histamine regulation as well. So keeping your histamine foods low, your inflammatory foods low, make sure you're getting those B vitamins for sure. I've also noticed when I don't have my B vitamins, I don't tolerate greens as well. So like your spinach, your kale, and your peppers and that stuff. So I get very gassy from those foods.
Yeah.
Like the high oxalate, those nightshades and stuff. So B vitamins, I mean, I can't express how important they are. B vitamins and antioxidants, they're going to come up throughout this report over and over and over and over again. I'll pull them out every time. So vitamin B9, super important for hormone regulation. This one I can't express enough. This is your MTHFR, gene, your SMHT1 as well. They kind of go together. When you're not absorbing enough folate and you have these variances in your methylation, we have hormone disruption, infertility. Right? Cass and I both have a history of infertility in our endo stories. This is why we're both super folate deficient. So we'll touch on that one a couple times as well. And then this vitamin B12, super important for building the intestinal lining. So talking about leaky gut, right? Gut dysbiosis, just precursor to having gut upset, right? Gastroenteritis, diverticulitis, polyps, that kind of stuff. So making sure you're getting B vitamins is going to be as important for your hormones as it is your gut health and your liver health. We'll get to that as well. Vitamin C looks good. That's not bad. Vitamin C is important for detoxification. So lots of citrus fruit. I don't think I would supplement. It's not a big enough variance. I would just eat lots of citrus because I love whole food, right? I love food. Fruit first all the time. Vitamin D, I would be supplementing a vitamin D, super important for everything in the body. We know that. Good for your immune function, your bone, your bone health, your hormone health, your inflammation, just really everything. So I would take a vitamin D supplement, making sure you're getting it from a whole food source. We don't want to get vitamin D from a synthetic source because it's sheep's wool that's gone through 7 or 8 different processes before it's extracted using an astringent. It can be quite toxic to the body if we overdose. So making sure you're getting it from some kind of a lichen or lichen, however you want to say that, definitely from a whole food source. Calcium. So calcium's interesting. Making sure if we're taking calcium, we're taking it in a mineral supplement. We don't want to take calcium alone. If we take calcium alone, it'll actually pull all the other minerals it needs, right? Because we have compounds. When we eat a food, it's not just a calcium food, it's a food that has calcium in it, and it comes with all the other minerals and enzymes and vitamins it needs to absorb properly. Vitamin D being one of those. Vitamin D needs vitamin K, so it should be a D, K, calcium, mineral. But when we take a calcium alone, we strip all the other minerals from our bones to be able to process that calcium, and contributes to the increased risk of osteoporosis. So making sure if you're taking a calcium, make sure it's a whole, mineral blend. That's one of the reasons I love Balance, because it's got all the minerals and enzymes in there needed. Iodine. Iodine is interesting. This is a good one for glandular health, right? Sex gland health. Balance has 50% of your recommended daily amount from kelp, so seafood, whole food source. That's probably why you like Balance so much, actually. You got a couple areas where it's a void. Yeah. So iodine is super important to protect your sexual organs. So your breasts, your ovaries, your uterus, that stuff, right? Your sex glands. When we have a deficiency in iodine, we see increased risk of, tumors and cysts and that kind of stuff. So making sure you're getting adequate iodine, especially in the world we live in, where the EMF, the electromagnetic frequency, has increased from the 5G rollout. Renew will also protect you there, because it protects you against EMF. So adequate iodine and antioxidants for sure. This also helps support your thyroid. So hypo or hyperthyroid is a potential risk with not getting enough iodine. Be just cautious of that. Iron overload, iron deficiency, not too bad. And this omega-3, you do pretty good on your omegas. That's a smaller variant. I usually see 40 to 60% here. So I'll touch on it, although it doesn't affect Cass as much. It affects a lot of people. When we have a variance in our omega-3, we see an increased risk of inflammation. So omega-3 is our anti-inflammatory omega, and omega-6 is our inflammatory omega. And in the Western world, Canada, the US, we have a very rich omega-6 diet from all of, the not ideal meats, right? We're not eating grass-fed, pasture-raised. That's higher in omega-6. A lot of our grains and starches and potatoes and these things are really high in omega-6. So we want to increase our omega-3s through, olive oil, avocado oil, nuts and seeds. Our pasture-raised, grass-fed meat has 3 to 6 times more omega-3 than the conventional grown. So again, quality of your meat matters huge. And then taking a supplement for this, I take Renew. It's got omega-3s, antioxidants, vitamin E. It's kind of like a really good compound that fits the bill in a couple of areas. But yeah, managing inflammation, making sure you're getting adequate omega-3. And then we'll look at detoxification. So you're lucky, you actually don't have this one. I'm surprised actually about that. I'm going to go into it anyway, because it's a really common gene variant. This is the COMT gene. I don't know if you listen to Gary Brecka or any of these fancy biologists, but they talk about the COMT gene a lot. It's super important on our methylation. COMT gene regulates our dopamine, adrenaline, and estrogen. So when we have estrogen overload, this doesn't regulate us very well. And when we have estrogen overload, can contribute to cancer, right? When we have estrogen dominance that goes unchecked, estrogen becomes cancerous in the body. And that's where we see uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, breast cancer, endometriosis, right? Dysregulation of hormones that just becomes carcinogenic. So just because there's no variance here doesn't mean it's not impacting you, because we are seeing endometriosis in you. So I'd say there's something that's triggering this to not function properly. If we go down to the bottom here where it says tips to take power over your own health, we look at the necessary nutrients for this function. So in this one, magnesium intake is important. Vitamin C is important. There's that folate and that vitamin B12, where you have genetic variances in both, right? So making sure you're getting adequate of these nutrients specifically to support this genetic function. Also increasing quality of life through detoxification strategies. So sweating, fasting, infrared sauna, milk thistle, dandelion root herbals that support liver detoxification. With fasting, I like fasting when done properly. The majority of people are doing this intermittent fasting. They're not eating till noon or not eating till dinner. When we don't eat, when we skip meals, we're in a chronic calorie deficit. And long-term, that contributes to insulin resistance and estrogen dominance. So when we're saying fasting in this report, it's 1 or 2 days a week, you skip dinner and you do 16 hours where you don't eat, and then you go back to your regular schedule. We need to be eating breakfast. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. When we wake up, our sugars are down, and the longer we wait, the more they crash. And if you wait until they're crashed and then you have a meal, you're spiking your blood sugar. So if we want to keep regulated blood sugars, 30 to 60 minutes after you wake up, have a nice high protein breakfast, about 75% protein, paired with some really healthy antioxidant fruits and vegetables. That makes that like kickstarts your day in the right direction. Supports healthy hormones, healthy cortisol levels, healthy blood sugars, healthy liver function. Just everything is better when we eat a really good high protein breakfast. And then for estrogen management, cruciferous vegetables are fantastic. So your broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kale, that kind of stuff. Lots and lots of it. The more you eat, better. And then which one? Oh yeah, oxidative stress protection. So you need a lot of antioxidants. You're just more susceptible to, free radicals and stuff in the body. This is where I love Renew. Renew is just one of the most powerful antioxidants I've ever used in supplement form and protects you in this area. And so oxidative stress, EMFs, radiation, EMS, your electromagnetic frequency, right? So your electronic devices, your phone, your Wi-Fi, your router, the 5G, all that stuff. Radiation, so when you're flying, those scanner machines, right? Any kind of X-ray, that's all radiation. Also, any kind of environmental pollutant, so your carcinogens environmentally in your personal hygiene products, your cleaners, your air, right? Even air is full of pollutants. Your pesticides, your herbicides, all that kind of stuff. We really want to mitigate environmental toxin exposure, as well as stress. Stress is oxidative stress. So we really want to mitigate our emotional, mental stress as much as possible by incorporating stress management techniques to support this area. And then boosting your glutathione. So for this one, you could actually even do Optimize. Optimize would be beneficial for you, big time actually. It increases your glutathione, helps you break down proteins, helps you break down homocysteine. So it'd be, for what I see in your report, would be very beneficial.
Yeah.
Right. And then hormone health. So your biosynthesis of androgens and estrogens is how well you regulate your hormones. And I'm going to get you to go into this one a little bit because I know you've kind of worked with your own report to kind of study it. And I want to know from you what you've experienced and discovered in your own report before I go into it with you.
Well, in this area, I just have never, I'm either really high or really low with my hormone area. I'm either like absolutely no energy or I'm high stress. Like you were just talking about stress, and I'm like, I used to be the biggest stressor. Like every little thing would set me off, and then, or it's just the opposite. I'd have no energy to do anything. So I have struggled with that my whole life. So just like seeing that, like that I have that variant was really like eye-opening, and like, I don't know, it was just really eye-opening.
So this is like the production of our hormones, right? How well we regulate hormones. So production of estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. So we often see, variances in hormone regulation when there's a variance here. And when we look here, what's important here is choosing hormone-free meat, dairy, and wild fish, right? Quality of your meat matters. So, and this is, in my experience, when I had my report done, my aversion to meat was not as much my digestion as it was my aversion to the hormones in meat because I wasn't buying high-quality meat. When I changed from your grocery store conventional grown meat to your pasture-raised grass-fed, my digestion changed, and I can eat meat all day long now. Like, I can't even express how crazy that is to me that I'm even saying that, because I used to have, like, I used to never want to eat meat. It used to gross me out. And when I got my report done, I had asked my coach, I was like, I want to go vegetarian. I'm so done trying to eat meat than like gagging on it, because it just grossed me out. It wasn't the meat, it was the hormones in the meat. My body was like, get that out of me. So when I switched the quality of my meat, huge changes. So the quality of your meat absolutely matters, especially if you have genetic variances in your hormone regulation. You know, if we look at your grocery store, oftentimes it's the lower quality. You know, you got your A, your AA, and your triple A. It's probably the A. A lot of our dairy cows, you know, once they don't produce milk anymore, they go to slaughter. That's a, you know, that's what we find in our ground beef and stuff in grocery stores. So you can imagine the higher estrogen load in meat like that, right? They've been fed stuff to keep them milking forever, so their estrogen is higher. So quality of your meat matters huge. Avoiding herbicides and pesticides. What's that?
And now that I'm thinking about it, I think that's why I had such a hard time on the hormone therapy and why it didn't work, because she was giving me the dose, but it's like she was constantly increasing the estrogen because it just never was enough, or my body was just like eating it up too fast. So my levels were constantly dropping, or they were too high. There was never a balance on it. It was always me waiting for that next dose, or crashing, or too much. It was never a balance. So I think this is why.
I would say, you know, when we don't produce hormones well, right, and we introduce, you know, bioavailable hormones or bioidentical or birth control or whatever the case may be, when we introduce a synthetic hormone and we don't produce hormones well or regulate our hormones well, and we introduce a synthetic hormone, our body's going to stop making it. Right? So if you did produce estrogen at one point and then we introduce a synthetic, well, then your natural production is going to go down and your dose is going to need to increase. It's like indirect relationship that way. And we just want to avoid that, because then you're reliant on those synthetic hormones, right? There's no getting off them once you're on them without going through a detox. So 100%, even in this area, it says to not go on hormone therapy long term. So this supports,
and that's where I was.
Supports your experience for sure.
Yeah.
Herbicides and pesticides, super endocrine disrupting. So we want to make sure we're washing all of our produce, growing our own produce, right? Just avoiding those herbicides and pesticides as much as possible. Some produce is heavier sprayed than others. So there's a clean 15, dirty dozen list you can find online to protect yourself against some of these carcinogenic endocrine disrupting chemicals. But choosing organic as often as possible, and then doing that baking soda rinse, or just getting those chemicals off your produce for sure. Microwave, always switching to glass. I mean, ideally we don't want to use a microwave. It changes the molecular structure of our food, which is not good for us. It's radiation, right? So just consuming radiation with that oxidative stress protection, I just wouldn't. But again, switching to glass, because plastic releases those microplastics and BPAs and more toxins. So trying to avoid a microwave or using glass. And this one, avoiding bleached paper. This one's interesting. They say coffee filters, tissue paper, and napkins, but I'll go there. Tampons and pads, okay? Bleached paper releases dioxin, which mimics estrogen in the body. So in our most vulnerable state, that time of the month when our hormones are wild, we're sticking the chemicals that literally increase estrogen and hormone imbalance right where the sun don't shine, where we're most vulnerable. We need to get away from tampons and pads as much as possible. Go with organic cotton period panties and a Diva cup or a Nixit ring or something like this, but getting away from bleached paper products in our most vulnerable area. I can't express enough how important that is. When I went to a Diva cup, it changed my periods overnight. Like the cramping, the heaviness, all that was gone. And I no longer suffered from bladder infections and yeast infections after my cycles every time. It really creates such a disruption in your vaginal health, your pH balance, and all that stuff. Avoiding the use of household chlorine containing bleach. So this one, a lot of people don't really use bleach in their house anymore. I think a lot of us are aware of how toxic it is, but a lot of people don't really know how much chlorine is in your drinking water. So for this one, really making sure you're getting spring water or filtered water, really good quality. You know, at this one, a lot of my clients are like, oh, I use a Brita. Brita's in a lawsuit for not actually filtering out chlorine. So get yourself a different filter. There's Zero Water, Sante Via, you know, there's a couple of different options, but making sure you're getting at minimum the chlorine out of your water. Again, something that'll filter out the pharmaceuticals, the pesticides, the herbicides, the agricultural runoff, the fluoride. Like, our water is so polluted. If you're drinking tap water, please find another source. The rest is kind of straightforward. So not too bad here. Metabolism of estrogens, estrogen metabolites. So just how well you flush and dump estrogen. I'll go into the elimination of estrogen metabolites. The other one's a little bit small, so it's not too much to worry about. But in this one, antioxidants, vitamin Bs. So this is why Renew and Focus help you so much. You know, anybody who's got a variance in these areas, in the hormone detoxification areas, these vitamin Bs and antioxidants are a lifesaver, absolute godsend, because they trend, right? We've seen your vitamin B absorption earlier, not very good. In the detoxification too, that COMT gene needs those vitamin Bs. And then again here, just needing a lot of vitamin Bs and antioxidants. And then this one, avoiding elevated homocysteine. So this is a big deal for you. You were saying, you know, when you increase your protein, you had a histamine reaction or a homocysteine reaction. Homocysteine is the amino acid found in your blood from eating meat. And when we don't break it down because we're not getting proper vitamin Bs or don't methylate that function well, we end up with a homocysteine overload that looks like a lot of inflammation. Joint pain, arthritic pain, swelling, inflammation, like things hurt when we have a homocysteine overload. So making sure we're getting a proper breakdown. Again, that's your vitamin Bs will help you carry that out. And then here, avoiding the use of amphetamines to treat ADHD and these estrogens, right? Catchable drugs. So that bioidentical hormones we were talking about, you're not suited for them at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that's one of the biggest things too, is I talk to so many women that are like, oh, well, I take birth control. Like, my skin won't stop breaking out and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, get off birth control. Instead of doing birth control, support yourself with nutrients, right? We'll start to see the gut rebuild, start to detox, because when we're seeing, you know, cystic acne, hormonal acne, a lot of that is because your guts are so malfunctioning that it's coming out your skin. Your detoxification pathways are not open. Your liver's backed up, your guts are not working, and it's coming out your skin. So when we focus on gut health and liver health, the skin actually heals. It's pretty wild. I think I haven't worn makeup in like 10 years. And I used to be like, I cannot leave the house without makeup. They called me pizza face in high school.
Yeah.
Focus on your gut health and your liver health, and your skin will heal. I promise you that.
Yeah,
again,
I was getting rashes.
Right?
Yeah, I was getting rashes from like the histamines, and I was like redness. I had a constant redness on my cheeks. Like, my daughter would always be like,
Rosacea,
you look,
right?
yeah, my daughter's like, you always look sunburned. I'm like, I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the Bs. And that's probably that B6, right? Because B6 is important for breaking down your macros. So having that protein gene variance, you need a lot of easier to digest protein sources. So having a balance of meat and plant to make sure we're getting all of the amino acids, but not too much meat. And then making sure you're getting those vitamin Bs to be able to break down the homocysteine. So that makes sense to me, especially with that B6 variance you have. This stuff just repeats. It's all the same. Detoxification, detox, 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 detox. So your hot, cold showers, your cold plunges, your meditation, breath work, you know, Epsom salt baths, like anything that supports detoxification and liver flushing detoxification, do it.
Yeah.
You see that over and over. So inflammation, and this is also super contributory to endometriosis, right? If we look at endometriosis, and it's funny because they'll tell you endometriosis, but they won't tell you that it's just a title for a set group of symptoms. So the set group of symptoms for endometriosis are scar tissue, lesions, bloating, pain, and inflammation. So often when I see somebody who's got endometriosis, they've got big detoxification issues, big antioxidant vitamin B needs, and big inflammation variances. So we're just in a state of chronic inflammation where it's developed these growths outside of our uterus, right? It's not a retrograde period. It's not, it's none of these crazy things. It's literally the body is like in such a state of inflammation and unable to detox that it's creating these growths all over to protect you from the toxic load. So the more we detox and the more we address the inflammation, this stuff just kind of all goes away. So inflammation we'll go into because this is a big deal. When we have genetic variances in our inflammation response, we are more prone, more at risk of insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, right? So Cass was saying her high carb diet, low proteins, right? That's super inflammatory. High glycemic carbohydrates are very inflammatory. So we really want to focus on a Mediterranean style diet for you, very paleo, no grains, no starches, lots of healthy carbohydrates in the low glycemic index, lots of lean proteins, right? Making sure we're not getting too much saturated fat. And then making sure we're getting adequate nutrients to support detoxification. So vitamin C, vitamin D, so support for you, 100%, right? I'm glad you got that one this go. Lots of foods that fight inflammation. So your pepper, your ginger, your turmeric, optimized would be great for you. Garlic, lots of raw garlic, right? Caesar salad's my favorite for this one. Olive oil, fish oil, berries, nuts, seeds, there's that omega-3 again. So renew, right? And then consider taking a probiotic. So for me, I also have genetic variances in my inflammation, but I also have a variance in my inflammatory tumor response. And I think that's why I ended up developing a tumor on my left ovaries, because I've got a genetic variance in that one as well. So chronic inflammation, just, like your body is going to protect you in one way or another, be it, extra growths or cysts or tumors or whatever. They're going to your body's going to wrap that inflammation, that toxic load into some kind of a bubble to protect you. And that's how we develop these growths and stuff. So we really want to make sure, we're eating to support low inflammation, detoxification, healthy hormones, regulating that blood sugar, right? She doesn't have big variances in her carbohydrate insulin. But she's got a big protein deficiency. And then, we don't want to introduce too much inflammation from increasing protein. So making sure we're getting adequate vitamin Bs to support the breakdown, et cetera, et cetera. So methylation, your methylation's not too bad. I often see quite a bit more red here, but you don't absorb your B12, essential for methylation in general. So it affects all the other functions, right? The transport, conversion, all that. And then this one, how effectively you methylate B12 into methylcobalamin. So you don't absorb it well and you don't convert it well. So methylation in general, you're just not functioning well. And when we don't get adequate B12, we see leaky gut dysbiosis. So just super prone to leaky gut, especially with all that cheese, right? With that big inflammation variant. So yeah, focus for you, huge. Your breakdown of homocysteine to methionine is great, but you're not getting the B vitamin precursor if you're not supplementing with a methylated form, because you don't methylate or transport well. So I could see how focus supports you quite a bit in this area. And then fitness, I know you and I are both just starting to work out, but what does your workout routine look like right now?
Right now, it's just very basic total body, like getting back into stretching, just doing some light crunches, just doing jumping jack, just very light, because my body's so out of shape right now. It's at like ground level. I cannot go into there with like high intensity anything. I mean, I'd be on the ground. So very just light overall, like trying to balance the weight throughout it, like do some arms, legs, core, and then that's about it for now.
So yeah, lots of body weight to get into it. I would also encourage walking just to keep things loose. So for you, a combination of endurance and resistance training. So maybe every other day you do weights one day, a walk the next, weights, walk, like that, where you're getting, 3-4 days of resistance training, 2-3 days of cardio, just to balance and increase the output of these. Being mindful of your joint health. So, after hysterectomy, our estrogen tanks. When our estrogen tanks, so does our collagen. So if you're feeling tightness and soreness, I'm not surprised. You have some variances in your ligament and tendon. Yeah. So just risk of tightness and soreness and arthritic pain, kind of. So making sure you're taking a collagen to support your joints for sure. You could also take a glucosamine if you feel like you really need to. Muscle strength, that's protein. So making sure you're hitting your protein target every day. And then this muscle repair takes you longer to recover from working out than the average. So making sure you're doing, your resistance training every other day to give your body a chance to recover. But this would also make you a good candidate for circuit style training, where you do, 4 different muscle groups in a row, and then you circuit back and do 3 or 4 sets of that. When you do that, you give your muscle a time to rest without affecting your blood pressure too much. You keep your body moving, so you're still in that, fat burning, higher energy state, but you're still giving your muscles time to relax. Whereas if you do, a set, rest, a set, rest, it's not keeping your heart rate up. So then it's not really giving you that fat burning capacity. So circuit style training for you for sure. Blood pressure looks good. Energy metabolism. So you're talking about being fatigued earlier. With hormones, yes. B vitamins, also important for energy. But for this one, having a variance here like this, I'd make sure you're doing your cardio 15, 20 minutes in the morning when you hop out of bed. Some jumping jacks, some body squats, maybe a quick rip around the block, something like that. And then oxygen uptake, you would do well with like Boost, something that increases your nitric oxide, your oxygen uptake. I could see you having slow circulation here. So when we have slow circulation, slow nutrient intake, slower lymphatic drainage, that kind of stuff.
Yes, and that makes sense, because I do, like, when I first get up in the morning, I sometimes feel really tight around my jawline, even like swollen almost. Until I start moving, then I feel like everything gets to moving. My hands and feet used to be a lot like cold all the time. They've gotten a lot better. But yeah, it's poor circulation for sure.
So I would almost do some lymphatic drainage techniques. There's tons online. You can find them. Just find a quick routine you can do in the morning. And I would start your day with a nice big glass of lemon water. Warm, with a little bit, like a little pinch of Himalayan salt in there. That would be great.
Oh, yeah.
And then your mental wellness. Oh, yes, I recall. So emotional eating, this can affect people in different ways. We can either overeat or we can not eat, right? I'm the variety. I actually do a little bit of both, depending on my mood, depending on what's going on. If I've been running myself into the ground, I'm really tired, not getting enough sleep, just on overdrive, I turn to sugar for that energy, which puts me in a state of insulin resistance and just ruins everything. Or if I'm under stress, I'll skip meals because I'm not hungry. I'm just like nauseous in the gut. So it's really important to be very self-aware here, because we don't want to skip meals, right? Chronic calorie deficit. And we don't want to be binging on sugar, because then both of those cause insulin resistance, estrogen dominance. We just have a whole slew of problems. So being very aware of the emotional eating. You've already mentioned how you stopped buying the junk food, stopped having that stuff in your house. Totally.
Yes.
Same, girl.
And I used to be guilty of under eating, because in society, you're almost told to eat less and you'll lose weight or you'll maintain this. So I used to only eat maybe like 2 meals a day, not breakfast. I wouldn't eat till like noon. Me being a breakfast eater is all new. And then, you'd eat your dinner and then you just snack a little bit. But I used to just try to eat less because I thought that's what you're supposed to do.
It is, I know it's the biggest misinformation out there, I think, is like eat less. Well, then you slow
Yeah.
down your metabolism and that contributes to metabolic
Yeah.
dysfunction. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've loved watching your change and transformation, your habits and your health and just everything. So yeah, emotional eating, don't shop when you're hungry, don't have junk food in the house, and just be aware of your stress levels, your patterns in stress, right? Are you overeating, undereating, snacking, that kind of stuff? And then cortisol, not a big variance, but in those years postpartum, right? In these years of motherhood that we're in, moms in postpartum are 98% elevated cortisol in comparison to everyone else. So having a variance there, getting adequate sleep, making sure you're getting adequate protein. Protein helps regulate cortisol. So making sure we're not in a calorie deficit. When we're in a calorie deficit, we're in a stress response, right? Cortisol is elevated. When our cortisol rises, so does our insulin. And when we have no food for that insulin to go put away sugar, we have more circulating insulin in our blood, which creates insulin resistance, estrogen dominance. So lots of stress management techniques, making sure you're getting adequate sleep, adequate protein, and just balancing your nutrition. Compulsive tendency with the emotional eating. So just kind of at risk, just a sucker for food. I feel like you're a foodie like I am.
Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely have compulsive behaviors.
Yeah, so do I. Perfectionism is my like perfect.
Yeah, and
And
even cortisol, yeah, even my cortisol, I do feel like I am a very high cortisol person. Like I wake up on high alert and like even before I go to bed, it's hard. Like I have to remind myself to decompress and to like turn everything down, shut everything down because I stay on alert all the time.
me too. Me too. Especially in the years like our your little is as old as I think her kids are close in age, but we're just in those few
Yeah,
years postpartum where, yeah, things are just crazy. So having a consistent routine to regulate the cortisol, eat adequate protein, have those meals, take our supplements is absolutely crucial for just managing estrogen dominance, managing blood sugars, really keeping our hormones regulated.
yeah,
And then the Alzheimer's risk. So this one's interesting. They're now recognizing Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. So insulin resistance in the brain, right? So we're talking about insulin resistance and hormones, but we also want to talk about protecting our brain. We also see heavy metal toxicity in the brain. So I think it was Dr. Bruce Lipton and his team did lobotomies on 10,000 brains, and the ones with Alzheimer's had 10 times more aluminum in their brain than those without. So taking, folate is found in a lot of these greens that help chelate heavy metals out of the body. So your spirulina, your chlorella, like your spinach and your dark leafy greens. So making sure that you're always supporting environmental detoxification, right? That oxidative stress, the folate, that kind of stuff, to take the heavy metals out of the brain, and then regulating your blood sugars, and you'll be able to mitigate that risk. And we're at the bottom. That is what a report looks like. Cass, do you have other questions for me? I'm curious if you've had anything come up where you're like, I wonder if.
not really. It's all still so new that it's like, but it's fun to like, I think my biggest take on getting my DNA is just the empowerment that I now have because I had no idea like you could have this kind of knowledge. I had no idea that you could take control of your own health. So now that I have this, it's just been like this newfound sight that I have. I view food differently. I now eat to like give my body what it needs rather than just go in the cabinets and just eat until I'm disgustingly full and then I'm like, I don't want to eat anymore. So it's just like the power and the sight that I now have is completely different. Even how I move throughout my day and what I do it for my DNA and for myself because how good I feel now, I do not want to go back to how I felt. And I didn't even know I felt that bad. I thought it was just how I should be happy that I have the health I do now that, I've had a hysterectomy. I put my body through all that. I felt I had to just settle for what I was given, but then I realized I don't. I just had to learn how to care for my body because I didn't know how. So that's
Yeah.
the biggest take from DNA is just the knowledge and the power that I now have. It's just like it just fuels you with this completely different kind of, I don't even know how to describe it.
I think the one thing I took away when I got mine done, so I got mine done 8 years ago now, to be still symptom free 8 years later with 2 kids naturally, I'm just mind blown at the power of what, you get to discover in this report. But having this knowledge just gives you that much more reassurance to keep going, right?
Yeah.
So when we look at healing, when we look at reversing chronic illness, when we look at attaining our physical, mental, emotional goals, whatever it may be, a lot of people are like, oh, I just want to get healthy. Yeah, but what does healthy look like for you? And then if we
Yeah.
look at DNA, it's like, well, this is the stuff you need to do. Right? It's not somebody like, oh, well, I'm telling you to do this and do this because I have a degree. It's like, no, this is what your genetics are telling you. I'm not telling you
Yeah.
to do it. Your genes are. So if you want to go against what your genes are telling you, expect, the negative outcome. But if you want to
Yeah.
support your weak genes, then you can anticipate longer years on your life, right? So to
Yep.
me, I see it as probably the most valuable health tool I've ever invested in because every other decision I've made after this has been based on the information in this report. Right, I've
Yeah.
got big variations in my detoxification, my hormone management, and my inflammation. So it's not like, oh, I'm not going to eat that because society tells me not to. It's like I'm not going to eat that because I know that if I do, I am inflamed and I hurt. Right,
Exactly.
I know
Yeah.
genetically, like I'm doing some damage. So it holds
Yeah.
me accountable to my own choices, my own fitness routine. And I feel, the more clients I work with who have this information, it's very similar where they're like, wow, well, I don't want to do it any other way because my genetics are telling me to do this way. And when we do, I mean, we could see people live to 120 for sure when we're supporting our
Yeah.
weak genes, right? We turn on methylation, we turn on anti-inflammation, we turn on our metabolism, we get, burning calories, increasing protein, increasing muscle mass. And it's wild to see how quickly people can get healthy with this
Yeah.
kind of information. So yeah, super empowering. I agree with that big time.
Yeah, and especially battling with endo for so long, having answers now rather than this is why your body was reacting the way it was versus those decade long, here's this, it might help here, like, just all the guesswork and the hope and just like the cycle that you go through. It's like, no, this is the answer. And that's
Oh,
it.
and the gaslighting too. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had endo. I suffered with endo for 12 years before being diagnosed. And when I was diagnosed, I was like, okay, well, what next? And they're like, well, we can put you on hormone replacement therapy and put you into medical menopause or give you a hysterectomy. And I was like, what?
Yep.
Like, I'm 29 years old. I still want kids. What do you mean? So I kind of walked away from that. A couple years later, was dealing with symptoms again, went back to have another laparoscopy. And when I did, they were like, yeah, you're just going to have to keep getting surgeries or have a hysterectomy. And I was like, that can't be the only solution. Like that doesn't even make sense. Right. So yeah, I'm super glad I found DNA, was able to reverse endo, and super, super glad for you that we have you in such a healthy state, even post hysterectomy, right? Because
Yeah.
hysterectomy cause a whole slew of their own problems. So yeah, and it doesn't even resolve the endo. If we look at the genetics, right?
Yeah.
We still have the detoxification and the gut issues and all these things that, yeah, you don't have a period anymore. So you're not dealing with the heavy, clotty, painful period, but you're dealing with everything else that comes with that whole
Exactly. Yeah.
hormone imbalance anyway.
Yeah, and my endo was already on the verge of growing back. So it's like I was left with nothing. Everything's taken out, but I'm still in the same amount of pain. I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do.
Well,
Until yeah,
I'm so glad that you found me, and we use DNA Power to get you sorted. And I'm just so
yeah,
happy to see your transformation over the last 8 months, 12, 10 months. I don't even know what
yeah,
it's been. We're coming up on a year, and it's just a beautiful transformation. I see
yeah,
your self-awareness every day, just more and more of like, oh man, I can't be doing this anymore, and I can't be doing that anymore. And it's
yeah.
beautiful to see. I'm so, so happy for you and proud of you.
I love it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay, girl, I'm going to stop sharing. Are there any last words you want to share before we hop off?
No, I feel good. I'm happy at where I'm at. I feel like I'm just where I'm meant to be.
I love it. I love you. Okay, girl, we'll chit chat soon. Thank you so much for sharing your story and, diving into your report with us today. I know this is pretty private information. We pride ourselves on information privacy at DNA Power. We do not share this stuff. We don't take personal information. So I'm super grateful that you've given us this opportunity to deep dive a report and see what we can learn. And we'll catch you inside the academy.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.